Hello and welcome to this chapter. Here we'll take a look on maybe one of the most important chapters I think we'll have here, which is d4, knight f6, knight f3. And here we will go for c5. So basically, most of the time playing the Benoni, my experience was that many people would play some kind of delayed scheme, more passive schemes, more with e3, with c3. And we'll try to play, some will try to play the London, some will try to play something more passive, maybe some knight c3 ideas. So this chapter will also help you if you don't really want to go for the main Benonis, but you want to play knight f6 and you have an answer to knight f3 and bishop f4. So we'll go for c5 immediately. And here it has some different, let's say, subtleties. It's not that easy. Here we'll first check d5, which is this chapter is about. And the idea of d5 is getting this space in the center. And here it's a bit different. If we were to play e6, which is the theme of the Benoni, here the main problem is knight c3. And here, when I was younger, I thought this wasn't that bad, because here, okay, I would take on d5. Obviously, white has a very nice square on d5. Here, we would love to have the pawn on c6, this pawn. And now we'll be able to play d5 and have a nice pawn chain. And here I thought that after bishop e7, playing knight c6, castle, and just then d6 and bishop e6, we'll be in time to have fun. But in general, this is just terrible, because after here, bishop f4, even along castle, c3, the bishop goes to c4, the gameplay for white is too easy, yeah? And we don't have anything similar to the Benoni, and basically we have some huge weaknesses. This pawn on d6 that cannot be defended with other pawns, so it's kind of isolated in some sense. So this is one important take here. So what do we do? So here there was the option to play some more safe ideas. Here you could also play d6, since we're talking about the delayed Benoni and also the Benoni with c5 in different chapters, with c5 and move 1. You could also go for d6, g6, bishop, g7 and transpose to those chapters. But here you also have the idea of b5, which is very much critical. It resembles to the Volga and the Benko. And my approach to that move is that, okay, we want to challenge white. White is playing somewhat of a scheme with knight f3, wants to play safer, wants to play the London. So I felt like this should be the logical continuation. And most of the courses I found about the London, they recommend d5. And for me, this doesn't make any sense. Because usually the London player, or the idea of the London, is to play some kind of a system that works well everywhere. Yeah, like you can just play safe, you want to develop. But here d5, suddenly we change the approach of the game, and basically we go for a very critical position, a very unbalanced position, and so many opportunities for both. And basically we change the nature of the position, and I don't know, it doesn't make much sense, because most of the games of the London players will be safe games, will be like easy development, long game, waiting game, another different approach. But here it's precision, dynamics, and changing nature of the position. So, I mean, I already would be very happy. So that's why I thought c5 must be a must here. And here, again, b5 would be our choice. Here white has tons of moves. We'd start with the simplest, but here we have a blueprint that works against every move, which is to play b4. Yeah. So basically, if you don't remember anything, I want you to remember that we play b4 against everything. Here, first of all, c4 basically transposes to the Benko, to the Volga, when white played knight f3, which is not one of the main lines. Here I played queen a5 check many years ago, which is very interesting, because we kind of forced white to play some weird move, and now we play b4. And suddenly these pieces are just a bit awkward, and we just want to play gc, bishop c7, and we have some kind of a delayed Benoni, where white is kind of struggling to develop and to get presence in the center. Because you see, here is not easy to play e4, or even to create anything with the pawn chain, yeah? So here we would later on play d6, d6, and challenge, and do somewhat of a Benoni, but with the pawn already in b4, yeah? So, yeah, it changes a lot the nature of the position. So here I thought as well, why not b4, straightforward? It feels much more logical. And here white has many chances, many ideas. First of all, a3 must be the most principal idea. Why? White wants to challenge these pawns because we overextend somewhat here. So we need to play accurately. And we cannot, for instance, play a5 and try to retake with the pawn because the rook will be fall. So we need to be a bit creative. So g6, we immediately go for development. So we play b4 and g6. Almost every line goes the same way. We don't really care about d6. d6 is a problem if we weren't able to develop in general. We will see much more clear in other variations, but d6 doesn't prevent us from developing anything. Actually, it helps our bishop to get out, and basically it's a nonsense move. d6 would be strong if this knight will be helping, like the knight will go to d5 or b5, but basically thanks to b4, all the d6 ideas are not present. So after ab, here white has a couple interesting tries. One is e4. Again, thanks to this chessable vibe of playing the London, and then if they play some critical sideline, we will go for the most critical line. I think this one is the most relevant move you need to check. And here, after knight d4, queen d4, 3 attack, we threaten knight, rook, and rook a7. We just go back, and white takes on a7. Here we play knight a6, and here the key idea is that c5 square is very nice for our knights. Yeah, so we take with the cb, but this idea is very much prevalent in most of the. And also it's seen the. You can see it in the Sveshnikov, I think, in Sicilian. Sometimes we get this nice square, and yeah, basically after bishop e3, white threatens bishop b6, but again white has some issues with this knight, and we are just very close to castle. We play d6 because otherwise we lose the queen, knight bd2, bishop g7, bishop e2, say, and here queen d7. Now after castling wouldn't be that bad, but now that white kind of defends this square, so knight g4 is not a threat. Now knight d4 might be a serious contender for a move for white. So queen d7 is a bit smarter. And basically, if whatever white takes, we just want to play knight here, knight c5. Just think about this setup, because the knight will go to d7 many times. And even when this knight on a6 is on b8, we want to take with the f knight, so we get all the squares, all the dark squares here. So for instance, castle, take, take, take. This was a game from a colleague from Catalonia, like Daniel Zina. He's a known player for the Benko as well. And he got an excellent compensation here. Maybe knight fd7 and knight c5, and later on maybe e6, and we get the hang of the dark squares. And white has some pieces that basically are colliding with the pawn chain, and they cannot do anything much more active. And the bishop is kind of trapped. Yeah, for instance, let's compare this bishop on e2 or having on a4 or b5, like ahead of the pawn chain and doing something proactive. So here we have a very pleasant endgame. White can also try to play something like knight bd2 to play e4. But here, this is similar to the Bow Indian, where white plays knight bd2. Often the case is black is happy to just put the knight here and just go back with the bishop, because the knight already is kind of annoying white's pieces. So here we just play d6. I mean, this is a novelty. It's a funny one, because it feels like we cannot play d6 because of queen a4 check. So actually it has a positive effect, because it feels, here you can like simulate like, oh no, my pawn, as Eric Rosen would do, because here it feels like white should be fine after queen b4, is taking a pawn. But here, actually the compensation is insane, I feel. After something like, I don't know, queen a3, we could even play knight a6 straightforward. We want to play knight b4, we threaten knight c2, then knight c5. We put all the knights on the dark squares, and suddenly our bishop is insane. And also the knight on d2 as well is such a huge problem. Like white eventually would need a couple tempi to put the knight here. But in the meantime, we can create havoc in the center with e6, and c4 with bishop a6, with bishop g4, even f5 at some point. f5 is not that's good, but I feel it's also a possibility. And white is still struggling to move the pieces around. For instance, queen a5 loses immediately to knight c7. It's a funny trick, and basically white is losing material. And yeah, this surprising setup, this conceptual sacrifice is actually amazing. And white would be strong, I feel, here, because our moves are very easy, you know, like we put the knights there and suddenly we create threats out of nowhere, yeah? And yeah, basically This works very well with Benoni. Here, with the Volga, and here knight bd2 is another way to approach the position, to play e4 and develop. And here I feel this is just fine. Here, for instance, a5, I really like to have knight a6, basically to prevent any kind of breakthrough through the queen side. And now we will play e5, knight h5, and basically we have some kind of King's Indian, where we completely blocked the queen side. So white doesn't have the typical a3 before and the typical compensation, yeah. Or, well, not a compensation, but the typical initiative on the queen side. And we need to be in a hurry, let's say, to pressure the queen side. So here we want to play e5. And for instance, whenever we play e5, we shouldn't be that worried about de, because usually if this knight is on d2, it's not easy for white to just push forward. We can even take with the bishop. We don't care that we have this pawn back on d6. We can play knight c6, knight d7, we can play around the dark squares, yeah, when this bishop is so strong. Again, I feel this variation is very easy, I'd say. I played many times, I remember with black, and yeah, I don't know, it feels a great solution for the Volga. This is not a Volga course, but I don't know, it just feels, you just need to remember a couple ideas, development with g6, that d6 doesn't matter, and yeah, this is fine. So here, I'm pretty sure you understand now that a4 doesn't make that much sense now. And a4 and c4 that many people play doesn't make sense because we want to play b4 anyway. So basically it's forcing something that, okay, we are fine with that. So here, for instance, white could try to play a4 in order to get the c4 square access. But here it's a bit clunky for white because how do you exactly play now? Tell me. You cannot play e4. You need to play e3, but if you play e3, you cannot play knight d2 because the pawn is hanging. And if you play e3 is very slow, we are already castled almost. And the thing is, white would dream to get the square and to grip, but there is no way. There is not a way. So we also, again, this is a very important advice I have to you. Like, if you are afraid of something or some plan, try to give it a shape. Try to give it some concrete way to achieve that, to get there. Because otherwise you will be much weaker in general, because you will be not paying attention to exactly which move annoys you, why it annoys you, but just ideas that I need to prevent this, I need to, but here, okay, if you think twice, how exactly? So your question should be always how, not, I shouldn't avoid this, I shouldn't enter this position. Yeah, and what's your opponent's next move? Again, just stay in the game, not to be afraid of just simple ideas. And here we have different interesting options. We will cover now a very weird option, which is c3. We will start from c4, which is maybe the most played variation. And here c3, which is such a weird move that I love it. I discovered many years ago, thanks to Yosha Iglesias, and she said that the engine would suggest this line, and it was very funny to me that why c3? That looks clunky. Yeah, looks like the knight cannot develop. Here, you are not even defending the center, but the idea is very subtle. The idea is after g6, you want to play e4. You want to give up the pawn, and suddenly c3 makes an appearance here of a reason, because otherwise we'll be able to win a piece with queen a5 check. But okay, white gave up a pawn in the center for the pawn on b5. What this should matter? Because here, after here, rook e1, knight a6, c4, this position is excellent for white. Because the center for black cannot be pushed forward. For instance, it would be excellent if black would manage to play e5, and now play again. But here we always want to thin out the center. And white has a lot of easy, let's say, development here, and a lot of presence on the center. And black is not easy to develop all these things. Like, basically, you need to put something in d7, but d6 is hanging. How do you exactly put something here? If you move the bishop, this is hanging. So you start to realize how it is very easy for white and very hard for black. This line actually resembles to some funny idea, which is d4, b5, e4, bishop b7, and here bishop b5 is one of the main lines. And it's counterintuitive, but has the same vibe. Basically, we castle, rook e1, and c4, knight c3, bishop f4, and d5, and we push everything into the center. So actually, it has the same grounds, the same logical reasoning behind it. So after after c3, we play b4, straightforward. Even here, yeah. I mean, it looks silly, but basically we prevent e4, so white does look silly now. This is kind of a novelty before, and I really like the idea of keeping you playing the same ideas all the time, the same themes, yeah. So here, bishop g5 is more or less the first threat that white has. White can always take here, but we are kind of threatening bishop b7, and for instance, something like this would be not very good for black, for white, as the pawn is falling. There is no way, or maybe we could defend it with e4, but this position is still be complicated. We can also play a5. We can also then play d6, g6, bishop g7. And basically taking here allows us to have this very nice square for the knight. And suddenly it becomes a bit uncomfortable for white to keep going on. Like, for instance, what's your next move? Like you want maybe play bishop c4 to play e5, but now we can play d6, knight d7, and then g6, then bishop g7. And our development just flows very easily, yeah. Maybe e5 could be dangerous, but okay, I don't know, just take and knight d7. We have all the development. Like, I don't think you should be worried here. And yeah, g6, bishop g7 is just coming, and we complete the development, and we have everything we wanted. And also the pawn on b4 is very much restricting of this knight, so white cannot bring up more pieces to the center. So white prefers to keep this balance because we don't want to take, because knight c3 is amazing. And we want to kind of force c4. So here b4, bishop g5 is the most, I think it's the best move. Other moves look a bit clunky to me because bishop b7 is just coming. So bishop g5, and now g6 is the move, I feel. A bit more precise than bishop b7 now. And again, d6, we shouldn't be worried about d6. Yeah, like since this knight is not coming to d5, we are fine. We can just play bishop g7, play along, doesn't matter that much. Now, for instance, cb4 is interesting because after taking knight d2, like we are getting into trouble if we want to take the pawn, like knight c4, knight d6 is a threat, and suddenly we cannot take with the e pawn, something like we should be worried. So knight f6, e4, white keeps with initiative. Again, we should be, mostly when we are preparing a new line, we should be worried about the most critical, the most direct way. And sometimes it's just enough. If you know this way, then it's easy to check the other ones. So for instance, here knight d4 just loses to queen d5, and if knight c6, we need to play e5, just threatening, but now knight d4. What I like about this line is, if you think about it, we only play the only moves we can play all the time, so it's not difficult to find the moves. After bishop f4, just bishop g7. And we will play f5 to defend the e4 knight, and we just have a good game here. I don't know, just f5 first, please, because otherwise if we try to, let's say, castle directly, now queen d5 would not allow us to play f5, yeah? And we would lose material. Okay, maybe g5 is still a game, but we are almost losing already. We're having the kings of rail. So, yeah, this is a tricky line, but okay, I'm just... There is no games here. I'm just, let's say, creating the theory here. So again, this is very unlikely that your opponent plays like this. So a3. Now bishop g7. Again, our main goal is to accelerate development. And here we just give up pawn but to just be able to castle. So white takes the pawn. Now queen b6, which is threatened here because otherwise white wants to play knight c3 and then b5 would be possible, and this would be very harmonic. So we want to create some annoyances. And after rook a4, knight a6, we keep pressuring the pawn. And basically something like b5 to give up the pawn and try to play e4 or something like that. Now just knight c5 and it's just knight c4 coming. We get the bishop pair, then therefore white will be weak on the dark squares all the time. So now after e4, and is a chance to make a mistake now, because knight a4 take, bishop e3 would lose a piece here. I mean, it's a bit... I mean, if your opponent just found it on the board, like suddenly you're losing a bit. Like you clap, yeah? But okay, again, I'm just discovering all the theory. After b4, there are no games. Okay, there are a couple of games, but it's just out of transposition, most of them, and there is no theory. So again, we need to be wary of the direct threats of e4, and yeah, and white needs to create an active move. So here we take here on b4, knight c3 is ideal. Now here the theme that we know very much, which is to play a5. So the idea is that white is kind of threatening this maneuver that we know very much from the Benoni, and we want to get ahead of it. Again, I'm just focusing on optimal play for white. Yeah? Like almost very creative ideas, very challenging ones. Otherwise, mostly we can castle, we can just take the pawns, we can just play for free. Yeah. So again, don't be too worried about this. It's just about information and interesting ideas for white. But okay, after here, just e6, and we have an excellent dynamic position. Like this bishop is just covering this line. The bishop can go to a6 or to b7. And the b2 is also weak. And basically we have some unbalanced position that is actually very interesting. And here, basically we kind of covered this this idea with c3 and bishop g5, and basically I feel this line could be very surprising because c3 I think is recommended in by Schialecki in the Keep It Simple. Actually, I feel is a great idea. It's very funny, but actually very practical idea. So yeah, I was quite happy to find this b4 a very reasonable creative idea as well here. So moving on, we go first to a very critical line, which is e4. And with e4, basically white sacrifices a pawn and to get some initiative in the center. I mean, it's so awkward, I feel, to justify this move. Basically, the engine says it's interesting, and white has a lot of development. It's not something your opponent will find over the board, and it's kind of similar to c3, but in the sense that here taking on b5 is not a possibility. It's suggested by Le Quang in his lifetime repertoire with London. And yeah, it's an interesting try to have some easy game and some force game, yeah, and some winning ideas. And here, basically, we have the same approach in both cases. What are both cases here? In case of 2 bishop f4 or 2 knight f3, we play it the same way, and white has also the same sacrifice. Instead of bishop d3, white has queen f3, but we play the same move, queen f5 check first. Basically, we define b5, and we don't allow white to play this kind of setup that is really nice. So here, knight d2 is the main move to accelerate development. Playing c3 would be too slow. So now knight f6 is really bad, and knight d6, sorry, is really bad, because in case of knight d6, there is a possibility to play castle, and after c4, that looks very tempting. Knight e4, and white is almost winning thanks to the initiative. I mean, this is not something you would find in the average level. This is very deep, and okay, you should know this line. I actually never checked this line before this course, because okay, thanks to the Chessable, so many new lines are coming into attention, but yeah, it's important to know how to react, yeah, because you can get a quick lost, yeah. Since now the meta in chess is basically having a small ideas and try it one game and surprise the opponent, okay, and then you can check whatever you want, another small idea. So here we need to be careful. So after castle, white wants to play rook e1, c4, and basically develop everything quickly. c4 prior to castling wasn't that good because we could take, and white cannot take with a knight, which is preferable to threaten the queen, and taking with the bishop isn't much of a worry, yeah? So here now we can play c4, and now there is no knight d4 now. There's not the same threat because knight d6 was opening the e-file, and here it wouldn't be the case. So here you can just take with the g-pawn and we have an extra piece for nothing. Here bishop b4 is the move. Now after d6, this feels very, I don't know, awkward for white. The bishop on e4 cannot even move, the knight on d2 cannot move, and well, maybe knight d4 is a possibility. But here, actually, knight d4 was an improvement by Le Quang. It's a move that is not suggested in the course. but played against Zubov and played knight e4. And now after g3, bishop f3, white kinda improves the setup and wants to pressure the e file before we castle. And now bishop g7, rook e1. And here, I really like that Zubov played a move that is bad, but it's bad for a reason that, okay, not many people will be able to spot. Zubov played knight fd7. And here, this move is wrong after knight d6. Basically, we cannot take because the e would make us lose the rook. Okay, it's still not clear because here I feel like I can defend the rook, but after taking and queen f3, I guess we just have a double threat here. Okay, this is not obvious at all. And after bishop e5, which looks a bit more reasonable, here white has the obvious move b4. Yeah. The idea is to create some kind of deviation to the queen because the queen needs to be wary of c7. Let's say if we take knight b3, and now queen b6, bishop e3, and now bishop e7, knight a5, and suddenly the queen is trapped. Yeah. So yeah, obviously, and after queen b6, now knight e4 seems to be working for white, and okay. Yeah, what can I say? Yeah, it works, but I'm giving up a rook, a knight, and I'm just paying attention to play bishop e3 and threaten the king. Okay, I feel you get the point. That this line is not something that you should be too worried. Like, okay, white needs to be like a madman, and not even the author of the course found it all over the board. So and he's one of the best players in the world, I would say. So here we have bishop d7, which is much more, much easier. And after knight f1, white keeps developing and keeps improving the pieces. The main take for white is that after castling, we cannot castle because the e7 pawn is hanging. But here we just play queen b6 first. We want to threaten this bishop, this knight, and we want to provoke bishop e3. This is a weird line, but okay, again, this is very weird, and you need to keep following me, because here we would love to play queen b8, but after a4, ba4, knight c6, bishop c6, d6, d5, and now knight e3. Basically, we cannot defend this pawn chain, but with the bishop on e3, now this is not possible. After a4, take, and all this stuff. Now d5, basically white, there is no chance to keep the pawn chain, and we will be able to just take on c6 and enjoy the game. And white and black is fine. And here the same thing. You know, we are right in time to take it on c6, and okay, white can try to take on something like this, but we at least take the c6 pawn, and basically we are 2 pawns up or 1 pawn up at least. So okay, and white can play c3, and after castle, I think rook e7 and then knight a6. We put the knight on c5, and at least we have all the pieces on the knight squares. Knight on d4 is obviously annoying, but I don't know, it feels like a reasonable game to have. We have at some point we can have counterplay here. We have a square here. All the development is completed. I don't know. I feel my job is done here, and you're in your own to play this position. And yeah, okay. I'm not very much worried about this line, but okay. White can also play a4 to kind of have pressure everywhere. But again, we just play g6, and now bishop d7. The same idea. We defend b5. There is a pin here on the rook, so there is no possibility. Rook e1, bishop f3, the same idea. And in case of c3, yeah, I don't know. Like rook e7 is the normal move, and here we could play rook e8. This tension is a bit weird, but rook e8 is very much a fun idea. And here we take on a4, because now getting the knight on a4 would be, the knight on c5 would be excellent with these two pieces. And after c3, I have a funny idea here with queen b6. Because we don't allow the c1 bishop to move, and after knight e3, threatening c4, we can take on d4. And now play knight a6. This is quite surreal, I get it. But the idea of this bishop takes d4 is very similar to the ones you will find in the chapters of the last chapter about c5 and move 1 for black, because these two bishops cannot do anything with open diagonals. And the only weakness here is very well covered with his knight. And after queen b4, knight c7, all the pawns on the center are kind of weak. And we have a lot of pressure on b2, a lot of pressure on the center, and we have everything defended. Yeah, everything is very much well defended. So it's a funny position that your opponent might get desperate pretty quickly because it feels like, okay, I have bishop pair, and maybe your opponent will panic and try to open everything, but you have a very good defense. So yeah, I don't know, just very interesting ideas. But again, this I highly recommend. If you are here, I hope you know very well the main ideas for white, bishop g5 especially, that we will cover lately. Because this line is just okay, it's just a lot of engine and not much of a lot of dynamics. Here I found c3, again in an aim to improve, like as I say in the text, in my research to find how the next chessable course will improve mine. This new idea felt interesting with the aim of going for b2, b4 and abuse our weird queenside. Yeah, it's not. No one would find this all over the board, of course, and we have alternatives as well to prevent this. That's why I also gave you the delayed Benoni, because okay, you have an opponent that is playing knight f3 to cut you off guard. Then you can play d6 and then play g6, bishop g7, and not care about b5 and just have a game. That's why I added as well these variations. Like, it shouldn't be worried, but okay, yeah. Since we are also checking all the chessable courses here, you shouldn't be afraid. But okay, just improving all the lines. And rook e8. Now b4, this is the idea. Now queen a6 is to keep up the blockade. And now we want to play queen b7, or well, take on a4 and play queen b7, knight a6, knight c7, and then access pressure the center. And it kind of makes sense, I feel. The bishop might go to b5 to kind of blockade everything, and then we reallocate the knight to pressure d5. And okay, white needs to keep playing like flawlessly, dynamically accurate, and suddenly, I don't know, I'm not afraid at all in this position. We don't have weaknesses, we have a safe position, and white needs to take care of a lot of things. Like here, queen e2 is also interesting. Now we can take on a4 as well, and just give the pawn. And again, we have the c5 square that combines, this theme combines very well, because the knight on c5 will not be able to be expelled, let's say, and basically will defend a4, will also prevent white from expanding here. So it's kind of a one and all, yeah. Here, white has still a hidden trick, which is to play b4 here, thanks to the pin on the pawn. But here after knight g4, we have a crazy position, because the knight is kind of loose, but we take here, and basically suddenly all the pawns are in the air for white. And we want to take here, we want to play queen b7 and knight c7. I don't know, it's a very complicated position, and I feel it's very nice that we already know. But okay, again, I insist, all this is just for the sake of completeness. You should have more practice in the games. You barely will find this line, but at least so you know. So if you expect an opponent that has the Quang scores, so this could be interesting. Yeah, and yeah, more or less this line, I don't know, it's just a big pile of engine moves and just dynamically accurate moves that, okay, it's a new era, but again, I remind you that you can play g6 or d6 and just pretend nothing of this works for white. So finally, we'll go to the main line, which is bishop g5. So bishop g5 is the most challenging line here for white. White keeps accelerating the development, and this is maybe the line that was critical a long time ago and was considered the reasoning why you shouldn't play this b5. So basically, we will take a lot of attention here. And here I was considering many moves. Here, ideally, I would love to play g6, which is almost against any line is very good. But here, d6 is very annoying. If you recall correctly, what was the issue with d6 is that white was not able to play knight c3 and knight d5. But in this case, it is able. And after taking here, knight c3 would be excellent. Having the d5 square, having the spin. And white, the main problem here is that white doesn't need to prove anything. Doesn't need to create any threat or go for an amazing attack. It's just a very nice position, because this pawn structure kind of blockades our queenside and doesn't allow us to play freely and just having the pressure here on d5. Also, it's not easy for us to keep up with development. There is queen d6. We don't like to play bishop b7. Bishop h6 can be annoying. And white just keeps playing for the game. And now knight b5 is even a threat. So we need to react to everything. And okay, my main take here is that after d6, it's not that there is a line that annoys us. It's like against every move we make, there are 3-4 moves that are very reasonable and easy for white. So it's the fact of getting d6 in good conditions that is already enough. So if against any other move, black is actually almost equal. So yeah, okay, g6 would be great, but I don't know. So here we make the move that we love, and we played a lot already in this setup, which is b4. b4 is kind of a novelty as well. Here there is not much games played with it, and I feel it's again the same concept that we don't allow this knight to develop, so we want to quickly play g6, bishop g7. But this is far less optimal for black, so we need to be a bit more careful. So here, for instance, a3, we start with the first obvious move is to challenge this b4 pawn. We don't want to take in any case because we fix kind of white development. And here, ideally, we would love to play g6, but here AB, queen d4 is really annoying. It's a bit different because the pawn there is not a pawn on c4. So white has an extra tempo, so now e4, e5 is really strong, and actually white is much better, I would say. So in this case, we need to play bishop b7 first, which is a funny idea. So yeah, this queen d4 doesn't work, and here white has a couple options, or he defends the pawn, or basically takes on f6. So now after c4, we just play g6. We shift to the same old idea, but we have a bishop on b7 that it's a bit suboptimal. So yeah, it's a bit worse in comparison, but it's good enough, I'd say. Now queen d4. Now white is not trending before, and this is not as much as a threat now, because yeah, the white cannot just take here later on. So here bishop b7, and if rook a7 now, we just take, and similar squares now happen. And also the bishop is now on g5 compared to the lines we checked before in this video. And now all of those knight e4s or just rewriting the knight will imply that this bishop on g5 is kind of misplaced. Yeah, let's put it on red then. And now let's say e3, knight a6. Now white also needs to be careful that knight c5, castle, and rook a8 is trapping the queen. So queen d4 is a must. Castle, here we're just running knight d5. White couldn't. White could prevented knight d5 because there was a pin, but not anymore. And now bishop f6, and it feels like white is a pawn up, but white is very passive, and we have all the control on the dark squares. And after e6, white is almost losing, I would say, because we would just want to take on d5, play queen b6 to free this knight to the duty of defending b4, and now after knight c4, knight c5. White doesn't have any pleasant answer to counter this, because b3 would imply that the b3 pawn would be weak all the time, and we have the c3 square very nice with the bishop, and we have access to the a file thanks to this bishop, and not playing b3 would mean the b2 is also tagged all the time. So again, this position is terrible in practice, and actually black has an excellent compensation and actually a great advantage. So white can try to play e4 first, now d6, and this is a much better version for white, because now white can play bishop d3 in one take, because before white needed to play knight d2 in order to play e4, but here white kind of optimized a bit the development, or queen d4 in order to play e4. There was no option to play e4 straightforward, but here just castle works very nicely. And after now friending knight c5 is key. And again, if you don't remember the theory, you see that most of the time we're just developing, we're just going ahead. And after queen b4, now knight c5, and we threaten both pieces. And white will lose e4, and suddenly rook b8, bishop a6, we pressure here. Like, we have all the dynamics in our favor. And this position is actually excellent. And after knight c5, we have a great compensation thanks to the dark squares. And again, we'll follow up with rook a8, rook a2. Let's say something natural would be something like this, knight d2 to kind of prevent. And now rook a8 and castle, maybe rook a2 straightforward. And we have a lot of pressure on b2. We can start with this. We can jump here. We can play b3 at some point as well. Like, there are so many tricks that white needs to be care of, and we have a lot of compensation, a lot of initiative. Yeah, like this line is a bit more tricky. But again, we are so far ahead in theory here. This is everything is new. So yeah, I shouldn't be much very worried. And now white can take. and we take with the e pawn. In general, we want to play g6, bishop g7. We want to close the bishop. And thanks to not playing d6, this bishop is defending b4. So it's kind of having a double idea. So c3, g6, and c3, and now queen b6. And I feel this is very simple. We want to play g6, bishop g7, castle f5. And later on, we'll play d6, knight d7. And the main take here is that we don't want to take neither of those pawns because the knight will be happy to develop through here or even through here. And basically, if black takes everything, we get a lot of presence also in the dark squares because these pawns are kind of holding everything for our strong bishop on g7 to get active. And later on, we just develop the knight. Maybe here, maybe through here, depending on what white does. And also white has a hard time playing knight d2, knight c4 because the d5 pawn is in the air. So there is not an easy way for white to just crush us. So that's why I feel I leave it here. And this position is very, very practical. And yeah, with that, we got all this critical line with a3. We have a couple more to go. Now white can also take here. And as we often say, first checks, captures, and threats. And here white can play. And there is a weird line here, which is queen d3. I mean, it's an engine line. Again, I'm getting so far ahead of the theory. Queen d3, the idea is that at some point I'm threatening d6 and queen e4 check. I'm basically kind of annoying you, like how do you develop exactly? So I play d6 and now a3. So it's something your opponent should know the engine evaluation because it doesn't make that much sense practically. Why would you play queen d3 first? d6 is a move I want to play. And now a3. And now the issue is that this pawn on b4 will be much more expugnable because there is some queen e4s, there is some queen b5 check as well. Now ab and queen b5 and taking would be worrisome. So here I feel like this is the easiest solution. We usually don't want to take, but white invested the tempo here. And okay, it's a very weird line. And after knight a3, bishop e7. And in general, we want to just castle, g6, f5, bishop f6, knight d7. And overall, white has a very nice square on c4, and maybe after c3, our bishop is not the greatest. But our next 6, 7, 8 moves are so easy, and white only has the c4 square, and we have, I feel, enough compensation and decent play. But yeah, this queen d3 is very unlikely to appear, but okay. So you know that this variation is possible. But here's the most normal way to play for white. In my experience, I actually challenge some of students to face me with this, and e4 is kind of the normal move. Again, since d5, d6 is not a worry here, we can accelerate the development here because there is no way white goes with it, and also it doesn't restrict any development here. And now knight bd2. Looks a lot logical to put the knight on c4, and now bishop d3 and d6, and now we kind of are threatening bishop g4, and also f5 is also a huge threat here because, for instance, h3, f5 would be great. And now you take rook e8, and basically white loses the right to castle, and we have, I feel, an excellent compensation like king f1, and maybe we could just go for queen f6, and now, okay, we just take with the h pawn, and then the knight comes, we change this knight, we threaten b2, we activate this rook, we threaten d5. Like, we have so much dynamic in our favor. Also, bishop b7 is interesting. How is white defending d5 without moving the knight on c4? Like, we have many chances, like, to create counterplay. So knight f2, like, it's the most reasonable move, and now f5 still feels natural, and after ef5, bishop b7, and we just want to tackle the d4 pawn. And now, for instance, bishop e4, knight d7, we threaten knight f6, we threaten most likely knight b6 as well at some point. But here in this case, knight d6 could be possible, so maybe we need to start with, I don't know, queen f6 or queen e7. Queen c7 could be also possible. Queen c7, also nice to prevent knight a5. So now the idea is that here, when we are allowed to play knight b6, we also want to take with the a pawn, and we have pressure on a2 and b2 at the same time. And here we have an excellent pressure on d5. And again, just for a pawn, we have a lot of dynamics in our favor, and white has a position that would like to remain passive and under control. So this sacrifice with the f5 pawn is also very thematic, and you will get some more practical positions just for giving up pawn. So basically, we have covered a3 and bishop f6, and here c4 is the other alternative that I was talking about that you will see in the model game. And yeah, white doesn't have much else to do. Like this b5 idea, I feel, again, it's so weird that all those London courses are giving d5 and just critical stuff here. This bishop g5, I think, is given by, I don't know. I think there was a guy giving bishop g5. I think Banzea, if I recall correctly. And yeah, it doesn't have any kind of flavor of the Benoni, of the London. So we are kind of happy to have these setups. And actually, what I like doing this course is like, okay, maybe you don't play the Benoni. At some point, you feel like, okay, it's tricky. Maybe it's too risky. At some point, I don't know. You don't want to play it all the time. But these alternatives to solid players, I really like to play them. And actually, I've seen recently many GMs try to go for c5, b5 against bishop f4 or knight f3. And actually creates a very challenging game for white, and at least you get a playable position, which is what you are looking for going in my course with the Benoni. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video and see you in another one.